Okay, part 2. So this is converting. Now here's a bunch of things that you should be aware of. Pi radians equals 180 degrees. And if I use this to my advantage, I know that if 7 equals 7, and I take these things and I divide them, I get 1, which means I can multiply that by 1, that by 1, and I'm not going to change its value, I'm just going to change the way it looks. Now 136, remember, is 136 degrees. I'm going to literally write that, and I'm going to make that over 1. And if I want radians, that means I want degrees to disappear, which means I need degrees down here. So I'm going to pick this one, and I'm going to go pi radians over 180 degrees. And now I'm just going to reduce that. So I know that 2 goes into this. I'm sure there's something bigger, but maybe not. 2, I don't want to have a big brain fart here, divided by 2, I should have been able to, is 68, and this is 90. But now I can take 2 out of that, so I get 34 and 45. And that's as far as I can reduce it. So I get 34 pi over 45 radians. All right. Now, if you're curious, you could just multiply this 34 times 180 divided by 45. If you ever were curious about it, 34 times 180 divided by 45, and I get my answer back. So that's a nice little cheat code right there. Just check your answer. Let's go to this one. 80 degrees, very similar to this, to radians. Now 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 45 should be our automatics, but this is not. So I'm going to treat it just like I did the previous problem. 80 degrees over 1, I'm going to multiply it by this because I know my degrees need to cancel. And this one looks a lot easier to reduce because 10 goes into that 8 times, 10 goes into that 18 times, probably should have picked a bigger one. 2 goes into that 4 times, 2 goes into that 9 times. So I get 4 pi over 9 radians. Okay. Now, these are a lot easier because you can just take your pi radians equals 180 and you can use that. Now, some of you, hopefully, you already know that pi over 3 is 60 because you have it memorized. So 2 times 60 is 120. Others of you, you're going to stick with the program. You're just going to stick 180 in for pi and then divide by 3. The danger in this method is some of you are going to try to divide both ways, but that doesn't work here. We're going to divide the 180 by 3, leaving me with 60, and this turns into 1, and that would give me 120 degrees. Same thing as we did that way. Don't worry about the negative, just don't forget it. Now, pi over 3, some of you are going to, like I said, pi over 3 is 60. You could just be done. Degrees. Or, you can go negative, substitute what you know pi equals in the world of degrees, and that's 180 over 6, or excuse me, over 3, and that'd be negative 60. So, 2 ways. And here we go. For each angle, give the reference angle. Remember our rules. It's got to be squeezed between the spinner and the x-axis and the quadrant. Well, this says down. Don't make that silly mistake and forget. Pi over 4 is 45. So it's really 3 times 45, which is 135. So I need to go down 135 degrees. Now don't forget what the instructions say. Find the reference angle. So I have to spin it down. Start here. 135. Well, there's 90 of it. I have to keep going. 45, and it stops right there. Now, some of you would say, oh, my reference angle is 45, and you'll get it right, but you picked the wrong one. The reference angle is actually right here because it's sandwiched between the x-axis and the spinner. So that's the actual reference angle, 45 degrees, and it's in the third quadrant. 1, 2, 3. Now how about this guy, 330? Well, that means positive, so I go up. I know that's 270, which helps me. And I say draw your drawings with some accuracy. So I know I have to go 60 degrees more, which is 2/3 of the way. And if you draw this correctly, it helps your brain calculate. Okay, this has to be my reference angle, and it has to be 30. So there's my reference angle, and it's in the 4th quadrant. Almost done. Find sine, cosine, and tangent. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So we got to spin our spinner that far. Again, pi over 3 is 60. 60 times 5 is 300. So we spin it 300. There's 270. Like I said up here, be accurate. 270 plus 30, which is 1/3 of the way. So I know this is 30. And remember the golden rule of trig. You never create your right triangle back to the y. Never. No. So don't do that. Always come back to the x. Now notice, a lot of math going on here. This is 90. If this is 30, this remaining piece has to be 60, and this is 30. Now, if you were paying attention in class, we talked about this is a proportional thing. So you can pick anything you want for these sides as long as you follow your 30, 60, 90 rules. So let's keep it easy. Let's call this 1, because that's my shorty. Everything hinges on the shorty. I double that to find my hypotenuse. I multiply that by the square root of 3 to get here. But if I don't pay attention, I'm going to forget a little truth. This has to be negative, because it's right, which is positive, down, which is negative. So what's sine? Well, you have to know this is our reference angle, which makes this my opposite side, adjacent, and of course that 2 is my hypotenuse. So let's find stuff. Sine is opposite, negative square root of 3 all over the hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, which is just the same thing as that. All right, a lot of math going on there. 315, well, got to get that picture drawn accurately. Start here, 270 plus another 45. My drawing's not perfect, but gets me there. Now don't ever come back to the y. Always go back to the x. Now, that's 90, and if this is 45, that's 45. That means this has to be 45. Now this is going to be positive, this is going to be negative, and remember our hypotenuse is always positive. So, again, just like the 30, 60, 90, you can pick whatever dimensions you want as long as you follow the rules. Well, in this case, I'll make that 1 and 1. And just like we talked about 45, 45, 90 rules, we've got to multiply this or this by the square root of 2 to get this. But don't forget, this is always positive, so that's going to be the square root of 2. This is my reference angle, so that's my opposite. This is my adjacent, and this is my hypotenuse. Now we can find our trig functions. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's negative 1 over the square root of 2. They probably want us to get rid of that. So that'd be negative square root of 2 over 2. What is cosine? Cosine would be adjacent over hypotenuse. And we could just steal this, but leave the negative out, because there are no negatives. So that's just going to be the square root of 2 over 2. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that's negative 1 over 1, which is negative 1. All right, 2 more problems and we can be done. All my pencils are running out, getting dull, so let's go here. Okay, so pi over 6. Hopefully you just know that's 30 degrees. If you don't, that's 180 divided by 6, which is 30, times 7 is 210 degrees. So we take our little spinner, keep track of stuff. There's 180. How much farther do I need to go? 30. So that gives me my reference angle. Do not go back to the y ever. Go to the x. This has to be a negative, this has to be a negative, and this has to be a positive. Good to get that out of the way right away. So I'm going to call this my -1. I double that to get my hypotenuse, but we know it's +2. And then I multiply this by the square root of 3 to get this, so it's negative square root of 3. Now my reference angle is right here, making this my opposite, hypotenuse, adjacent. So, what is sine of this whole spin? Well, it's opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent, opposite over adjacent. A negative divided by a negative is positive, so I'm not even going to worry about it. So it's 1 over the square root of 3. Well, maybe I should put them in there just to show my steps. But now they're positive. Now get that radical out of the basement. Square root of 3 times 1 is just the square root of 3. Square root of 3 times the square root of 3. The roots fly off, and there's my answer for tangent. Last one. 390. Well, if we think about it, if we subtract 360, we're left with 30 degrees. So we take our spinner, we draw 360, and then we got to keep going 30. So that would stop right there, giving us our reference angle. And then we know this is 1, we know this is 2, square root of 3. We don't have to worry about negatives over there in that quadrant. So this would be my opposite. This is my adjacent, this is my hypotenuse. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, 1/2. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, no negatives to worry about. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. And once again, we're going to get that square root of 3 out of there. So we get the square root of 3 over 3. Ladies and gentlemen, you did it. See me if you have questions. Like and subscribe. I got to go viral. This is the one.